What's up, guys? This is Joe with McPicks, here to break down UFC 284, Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski, pay-per-view event taking place down under Perth, Australia. We currently have 13 scheduled bouts. Overall, really solid card. I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into it, if you could please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, that would be much appreciated. Let's get to it. First matchup is Zubara TUKHUGOV taking on Elvis Brenner. Let's take a look at the line here. TUKHUGOV is a sizable favorite, minus 500. Brenner, plus 400 underdog. So Brenner's making his UFC debut on short notice. He trains out of CRUTE box, Brazil, with guys like the former champ Charles Oliveira. He looks to be a fairly decent striker, but what he really wants to do is get the fight down to the mat and work his jiu-jitsu. He has 13 wins, 11 of them being by submission. So he's taking on Zuba in his UFC debut on short notice, which is really a tough ask. I think that Zuba has the advantage everywhere outside of pure BJJ. He has striking, wrestling, defensively, cardio, experience, level of competition. All of these attributes, I believe, are on the side of TUKHUGOV. I would actually say that Brenner is pretty much sub or bust here. Zuba trains with Khabib's crew, so you know he's well versed in his defensive grappling. He has really good distance management, fast hands, solid counter striking, and puts a lot of pressure on his opponents. Although Zuba is not much of a finisher, I think he ends up knocking out Brenner at some point and hands him his first loss inside the distance. Zuba has multiple ways to win this fight, and I actually believe that the betting line is warranted, even though he's a sizable favorite. And this is why I actually parlayed him with another fighter, which we'll talk about later on this card. But the prediction is going to be TUKHUGOV by knockout. Next, we have Shane Young taking on Blake Bilder. Let's take a look at the line here. Shane Young is the favorite, minus 130. Bilder is the underdog, plus 110. So another fighter making his UFC debut in Bilder. He looks to be a decent prospect. Definitely a little bit old to be making his debut at the age of 32. His striking definitely needs work, but what I like about this guy is his grappling. He looks to have solid wrestling, good control, and good jiu-jitsu. He comes out with a better regional organizations in Cage Fury, where he was the featherweight champ, which is a good look. Although he is undefeated, he definitely faced some adversity against Carvalho, which I'm not sure if that was his last fight. Or 2 fights ago at Cage Fury. But in that fight, he was knocked down a few times, but he showed that he's tough. He has good recoverability and pretty good fight IQ because when he was knocked down, he tended to shoot for a takedown. Shane Young, on the other hand, is a well-rounded fighter as well, but he has more high-level experience. He doesn't really excel in any category. Like I said, he's well-rounded, but I'm just not really impressed with him. He could be outstruck and outgrappled. He only hasn't finished 1 time out of his 6 losses, so he's definitely tough, but I'm going to favor overall Bilder in this fight because I believe he's the better offensive grappler and is more likely to impose his will and dictate where the fight takes place. So the prediction is going to be Bilder via decision. Next up, we have Loma LOOKBOONME taking on Elise Reed. And let's take a look at the line. Loma is a minus 275 favorite. Elise Reed plus 230 underdog. So not a bad women's fight here. Both girls are predominant strikers. Loma is known for her Muay Thai, where Elise is known more so for her Taekwondo and her boxing. She has a good right hand. Loma is pretty solid all around. High volume, solid cardio, mixes up her attacks on the feet. It's pretty dangerous in the clinch and can utilize her trip takedowns or, hip judo throws to get her opponent down to the mat. Elise has some power in her right hand, like I mentioned earlier, but overall she's low volume and is a huge liability with her defensive grappling. I also don't think that she has the best cardio. She seems to slow down as the fight gets extended. So Elise's path to victory is kind of narrow. Maybe she can land the harder shots on the feet and win over the judges that way. I just think that Loma has a lot more ways to win and is more likely to get this fight down to the mat. She's definitely not the most experienced grappler, but is effective at getting her opponents down. I also think there's a chance that Loma finishes this fight by knockout. She has some nasty ground and pound, mixing in elbows to damage her opponent, and Elise has been finished by KO on the mat twice, both in the UFC. So in summary, I actually favor LOOKBOONME given her offensive takedown upside, higher volume, cardio, strength in the clinch, and although she only has one finish by knockout, I actually think that she's has the higher chance to get a finish in this fight. So I am actually going to predict LOOKBOONME by knockout, specifically ground and pound. Next we have Don Shameless Shanus taking on Jack Jenkins. Let's take a look at this line. Jack Jenkins minus 320 favorite, Don Shamus plus 265 underdog. So to me, this is definitely one of the more lower level fights in the card. And actually, I think it's a dog or pass situation, but I'm probably just going to pass overall. I really wasn't too impressed with Jenkins on his Contender Series fight. He was able to take down a fighter out of Ecuador, but he had zero takedown defense. And Jenkins ended up just ground and pounding him out in the third round. But to me, Jenkins looked kind of stiff and rigid, overall just unathletic in his striking and movement. Um, I'd take a shot on either the over 1.5 rounds here from a betting perspective or Shanus money line if you weren't so reckless. I think it's just going to be a pass because Shanus is just a wild man out there. And I'm going to end up picking the younger fighter in Jenkins. I just think he's more composed and technical. He's fighting on home turf. I don't think I would play him at these odds, though. No way. So not too much interest in this fight overall from a fan perspective or a betting perspective, but the prediction is going to be Jenkins via decision. Next up, we have Jamie Mullarkey taking on Francisco Prado. Let's take a look at the line here. Mullarkey is a decent sized favorite, minus 260. Prado is a plus 220 underdog. So Prado is a 20-year-old undefeated prospect coming out of Argentina, making his UFC debut. He's 11-0 with the 100% finish rate. So these metrics look good on paper, but Prado, he's fought some low-level competition. He looks to be decent with flashy, explosive striking and can also mix in the grappling. Mullarkey, on the other hand, is a tough, gritty, well-rounded fighter out of Australia. He's dangerous himself with a 87% finish rate. Mullarkey's long for the division, really good boxing, good head movement, solid cardio and output, and mixes in the wrestling well. Prado, looking into him, he definitely has some faults in his game. I've seen him taken down easily on the regional scene, and with some of the striking exchanges, he leaves himself wide open for counters. I think Mullarkey takes this young kid into deep water and drowns him. This is why I bet the under 2.5 rounds at minus 150. I have 2 units on it. I don't believe Prado has fought outside of South America, and now he's making the trip to Australia for a pay-per-view card. UFC 284, making his UFC debut on short notice. This is all a tough thing to do at a young age of 20. So I think a lot of people are going to see, that squeaky clean 11-0 record with all finishes and pick 'em, but I definitely disagree. Mullarkey's a rightful favorite, and he's actually the second leg of my parlay. I have him and TUKHUGOV parlayed, 2 units at minus 152. The prediction is going to be Mullarkey by knockout, probably late first or second round. Next, we have Shannon Ross taking on Clayton Rodrigues. Rodrigues is the favorite at minus 280. Ross is the underdog plus 235. So I like Rodrigues in this spot for a number of reasons. He's 6 years younger, which is substantial at flyweight. He's a more athletic, explosive fighter with finishing upside, and he's overall well-rounded. Ross is a scrappy fighter. He has solid technical boxing and really good cardio, but the durability is just not there. He's been finished in 3 of his 6 losses, and if you've watched his most recent Contender Series fight, he was hurt and knocked down on multiple occasions. He did show good recoverability, but it's just not something you want to depend on. Rodrigues lost his last fight against CJ Vergara. It was a split decision loss, although I actually thought he won the fight 29-28, but judges thought otherwise. But if you take a look at Vergara, he's really durable, and he took some shots in the chin that I don't think Shannon Ross would be able to take. I think that Rodriguez will land the harder and more flashy strikes, hurt, and eventually finish Ross at some point in this fight. And I actually have 2.05 units on Rodriguez money line at minus 205. I did post this bet earlier in the week on my Twitter and my BetMMA account. This line, like I mentioned earlier, has changed to minus 280, but I think it's still playable if you want to play him straight, or if you're a parlay guy, you could do that. Prediction is going to be Rodriguez via knockout. Next, we have Melsik the Gun Bogdasarian taking on Josh Culibao. And I believe this is the closest line fight. It's a pick'em. Yeah, minus 110 on each side. So this fight's going to be really entertaining, I think. It's a striker's delight. It's actually fairly tough to call, and that's why the betting line indicates that. But I'm going to take Culibao for a number of reasons. He's the bigger fighter in regards to height and reach. He has fought the better level of competition. It's really not even close. Has a better cardio, and I think he has the higher grappling upside. Melsik is flashy. He's an explosive kickboxer, but some of that explosiveness fades after round one. And he really hasn't fought anyone that is UFC caliber. Take a look at his record. Culibao's one loss in his record was against Jalen Turner, who's on an absolute tear. And in this fight, Culibao was fighting up a weight class on short notice, and Turner's already huge for the lightweight division. So it's not a guy you want to fight up a weight class. Both guys are super tough, so I can see this one going to decision, but personally, I'm not going to bet that because they both hit hard. May not be a bad idea to think about a live entry on Culibao after round one, especially if Melsik lands some big shots, because like I mentioned earlier, Melsik just doesn't have the best cardio. He slows down. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this one. This right now, there's money coming in on Melsik. I might wait it out and then play Culibao straight, especially if he becomes an underdog. But we'll see. I'll definitely monitor this one. But the prediction is going to be Culibao by decision. Next matchup, Modestas Bukauskas taking on Tyson Pedro. So this fight, in terms of betting line, very weird opener. Let's take a look. Modestas Bukauskas opened up as a plus 700 underdog. I don't know who set this line. It immediately got bet down to plus 215 range. But right now, Modestas is sitting at plus, let's see, sitting at plus 200, and Pedro is minus 240. So money has been consistently coming in on Bukauskas since that opener. So Bukauskas is getting another shot at the UFC after being cut a little over a year ago. He secured 2 decent wins in Cage Warriors, and now he's back. So you got to think he's motivated. I actually think that he's pretty solid for the light heavyweight division. He has good cardio, solid striking, and good output overall. He was finished by some killers in his previous UFC stint, Khalil Roundtree, Jimmy CRUTE, and I actually thought he won his fight against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who again is another fighter who's been doing well in the UFC. Tyson Pedro returned to the UFC in 2022 after a 4-year hiatus and finished both of his opponents by first round knockout. But honestly, take a look at it. The UFC gave him 2 layups, two of the worst light heavyweights ever, in Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. Pedro is a solid striker with fast hands. He has good power. I just think that he doesn't have the best cardio and is low volume. So I think there's actually a good possibility that Bukauskas survives round one, potentially winning it, and just outworks Pedro to a decision or even a late finish himself. And at this line right now, what it's sitting at, I actually think it's still wide. I have 1 unit on Bukauskas at plus 215. And I also think that Modestas is more durable than his record gives him credit for. Like I said, he fought 2 killers in Roundtree and CRUTE, where in Roundtree he got his knee blown up, and then he was cracked by Jimmy CRUTE. But again, these are 2 really, really aggressive fighters. And we have seen Oleksiejczuk finish the majority of his opponents in the first round, where Bukauskas was able to eat some hard shots from him. And this is why I also like the over 1.5 rounds. I haven't bet it yet. I don't have access to it yet, but I will be looking to play that. Probably a unit or a unit and a half. And like again, Tyson Pedro is low volume and he's not super aggressive. So I think this fight goes over 1.5. So the prediction is going to be BUKAUSKAS by decision. Speaking of Jimmy Crute, we have Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menafield. Jimmy Crute is the favorite, -215, Menafield +185. So really good matchmaking here, I think. Two powerful, explosive fighters going at it. Jimmy the Brute Crute. The nickname's definitely appropriate. This guy's just like a wrecking ball. His biggest liability is his defense, which we saw exposed in his last two fights, as he was knocked out in the first round by Jamal Hill, and then he took a super hard leg kick from Anthony Smith to the outside or lateral portion of his leg, which caused the temporary paralysis of the fibular nerve, which we saw this same exact thing happen to Sean O'Malley against Chito. So for those of you that don't know, the fibular nerve innervates the anterior tibialis muscle, which actually dorsiflex or lifts the foot. So you essentially get drop foot, and then you lose an important stability function of the ankle. But prior to this, he was getting jabbed to the face by Lionheart Smith, and it just wasn't a good look from the start. Crute is dangerous everywhere, though. He throws hard leg kicks himself and hard punches, is an explosive wrestler, and threatens with jiu-jitsu on the mat. He even submitted Paul Craig in the third round of their fight, which is obviously very impressive, given Paul Craig's jiu-jitsu credentials. Menafield is the more technical and defensive striker in the matchup. He's a dangerous fighter as well, with a solid 92% finish rate. An important factor to mention here is the age of the fighters. Menafield's 35 and Crute's only 26, which is substantial, especially given Menafield's fast twitch and explosive fighting style, which tends to diminish when you get past the age of 30. So Crute has been finished in all three of his losses, whereas Menafield has been finished in one of his three losses. However, we saw Menafield hurt multiple times against William Knight. Overall, you have to favor Jimmy Crute given his age, the fact that he's well-rounded and dangerous everywhere, and he's also fighting on home turf. But it's tough to trust him as a decent-sized favorite, given his defensive liabilities and because Menafield can hit hard. Violence seems like the obvious bet here, but overall, I think I'm going to pass. Crute has been finished early in his past two fights, and as a young fighter, I just kind of fear that he's going to taper back on his aggressive style. And Alonzo also has shown big periods of inactivity on the feet. So it's overall going to be a pass for me, but prediction will be Crute by knockout. Next up, we have two thick boys going at it. Justin Tafa taking on Parker Porter. Parker Porter is the underdog, +120. Justin Tafa, -140 favorite. Believe it or not, Justin Tafa actually missed weight in his previous fight against Hunsucker. He actually exceeded the heavyweight limit of 265 and came in at 267, which is absolutely ridiculous given he's only 6 foot tall. Anyways, I actually like Parker Porterhouse in this matchup for a number of reasons. He's well-rounded, has great cardio and output for the heavyweight division, solid striking, and most importantly, has grappling upside. He's not the best wrestler in the world, but he does land 1.45 takedowns on average per 15 minutes and will shoot takedowns relatively consistently. Tafa, on the other hand, has crisp, technical boxing with big power in his hands, but that's really about it. He's pretty one-dimensional. He will be the younger fighter here by 8 years, but is largely inexperienced with a professional record of just 5-3. And to top it off, he lost a 30-27 in a kickboxing base fight on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards against Jared Van Dara. Not a good look, if you ask me. So on paper, he has 100% takedown defense, but if you really look into it, he's only defended 2 takedowns in his UFC career, one against the legend Harry Hunsucker, and then one against Carlo Felipe, who we know is just not a grappler. Parker Porter has a knack for beating these like lower level heavyweights, Alain Badeau, Chase Sherman, Josh Parisian. This is kind of like a class where I believe you can lump in Tafa. So Tafa is fighting on home turf, does have the power advantage. He has decent cardio, is the younger fighter, and Porter has been finished in 6 of his 7 losses. So the concern here is that Tafa knocks out Porter early on. But I think this is easier said than done. As the fight progresses, it favors Porter given his cardio and his grindy fight style. I like the underdog in Porter, to win given his multiple paths to victory, and I actually have a 1.5 unit bet on him. I got it at plus 130 earlier in the week. He's still definitely playable. You can get him plus 120 on DraftKings right now. The prediction is going to be Porter via decision. Next up, we have Randy Brown taking on Jack Della Maddalena. Randy Brown is the underdog at plus 270. Jack Maddalena, the favorite, minus 325. Really good matchup here. Should be a great fight. Della Maddalena has all the hype right now, and it shows in the betting line. He has ridiculously good boxing, extends his combinations, and switches up his targets very well. Jack has super high output with really good cardio. Randy Brown, on the other hand, is huge for the division, 6'3", with an insane 78-inch reach. He's also well-rounded, has long, rangy strikes, and can also threaten with submissions. Although Della Maddalena has an impressive 93% finish rate, with the majority being by knockout, he's not like this crazy prolific one-shot power puncher, in my opinion. He typically finishes opponents by stringing together combinations, going to the head and the body, and switching it up until they essentially crumble down and he finishes them on the mat. And it's usually that liver body shot that causes his opponents to fall. He typically likes to back his opponents up to the cage, make them more of like a stationary target, and then work his combinations. Brown, on the other hand, is a really good mover in the octagon. He's rarely a stationary target against the cage, and he likes to sidestep, move laterally, skate around, and utilize his reach advantage, get in and out in his fights. Brown is going to be the biggest guy that Jack has faced, and I believe that Jackson had a more difficult time than he's used to finding the target. Randy has great cardio and manages distance well, getting in and out of his striking. The obvious concern for Randy is his durability, as he's been finished multiple times in the UFC, and Jack can absolutely knock him out, but I think it's easier said than done. Another concern I have here is Randy likes to keep his hands down and rely on his head movement and distance control as a defense. He could sometimes get caught moving backwards and fall down. His opponents jump on top of him, and he gives up a lot of control time. But I definitely can see a scenario where Randy kind of gets on his bike, moves in and out, utilizes his reach, outstrikes, and even hurts Jack on the feet, as well as threatens with submissions like he does if he's like pressed against the cage. Given his ridiculous height, he has that advantage. And also, the large octagon does favor Randy, in my opinion. So given his physical advantages, Randy's kind of the type of guy who can beat anyone, and is the type of guy you want to back at big underdog odds. This is why I feel comfortable placing 0.5 units on him at plus 265. So the prediction is going to be Brown via decision. Next fight, we have Josh Emmett taking on Yair Rodriguez. Awesome matchup here. Let's take a look at the line. Emmett is the underdog plus 140. Yair, favorite, minus 165. So you essentially have the length and creative striking of Rodriguez versus the power boxing of Emmett. This is honestly a really tough one. Both guys are durable with great cardio. Yair does have a substantial height advantage and is 7 years younger. Emmett has the power and wrestling upside. I'm actually going to side with the underdog here in Emmett because of that power advantage and the potential wrestling upside. This fight is actually favored to go all 5 rounds to a decision. And we've seen lately the judges are strongly favoring power and damage over volume. Rodriguez does not have the best takedown defense. Emmett has not completed a lot of takedowns in his recent fights. However, he's still going for them. Really is a tough fight to pick, but the prediction is going to be Emmett via decision for me. All right, we have the main event, Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski. Let's take a look at the line. Islam is a sizable favorite, minus 400, and Alex is a plus 300 underdog. Honestly, this fight's not getting the attention that it deserves. We have the number 1 ranked pound for pound fighter in Volk against the number 2 ranked pound for pound fighter in Islam. I really can't wait to see how this fight plays out. It's a pretty binary fight overall. Islam's going to look to grapple, and Volk's going to look to keep this fight standing and work his striking. The reason why Islam is such a huge favorite is because, for those of you that don't know, Alex is moving up a weight class. He's moving up to 155 and is at a pretty substantial height and size disadvantage. So the narrative that's going around is that Makhachev will be able to essentially bully Volkanovski with his wrestling and his grappling. Make no mistake, Makhachev will be able to take down Volkanovski. However, keeping Alex down on the mat is another story. Alex has one of the best get-up capabilities in the game. Not only that, he has outstanding fighter IQ, cardio, and has zero quit in his game. If you have not seen Ortega versus Volk, then I recommend you go back and watch that one. Volk was in some of the deepest submissions. It happened twice in one round, and he was able to get out of both of them. Both of these guys are exceptionally skilled and overall well-rounded. So from a betting perspective, the play to make, in my opinion, is the over 2.5 rounds, which I have 2 units on at -125. And it's something that I posted on my Twitter and my Bet MMA account a couple weeks ago. Both of these guys have very little weaknesses, and I actually think that this fight has a fairly decent shot at going the distance, going all the way to the judges. You have to favor Makhachev, given his size and wrestling advantage, but it's just not something I want to lay -400 or more on. I actually wouldn't hate a shot on Volk via knockout, which is, I think it was like +800, or just playing the money line, given how wide some of these lines are. But I'm more than likely just going to play it safe and stick with the over 2.5 rounds. The prediction is going to be Makhachev via decision. All right, so that about does it. I like to get these videos out early and hopefully beat some of the line movement. If you want to see my current bets for this card, then follow me on Twitter at McPicks or at my betmma.tips account, which the link is in the bio of this video. And as always, good luck with your bets.